I'm probably gonna get started right now. So who am I? I'm Willie, by the way. I'm a first year engineering student, and I like to work with mobile app development. Things like, especially specifically like user interface and user experience. And over the past year, I learned Adobe XD, which is another wireframing and prototyping tool. But that one is more paid, and this is a more free option. So even though I learned Adobe XD from like an online course on Udemy, the skills that you use on that platform is actually really, really similar to Figma and as well as a lot of other prototyping tools that you use. So no matter what like service or what platform you learn this on, you can easily switch over to whatever maybe you will be using in the future, whether just for personal reasons or as like your job. Um, so what is Figma? Figma is a vector graphics editor, and it's also like a prototyping tool. It's mostly web-based, but you can install the actual Figma app for Windows or Mac OS if you prefer. Um, and essentially, Figma allows UI and UX designers to plan out their ideas without actually having to code anything. So um, as a designer, you would want to kind of visualize what your app or your website, your software will look like. Um, and without tools like these, you would have to like essentially start writing HTML or CSS code to start laying things out. And then your code might get a little bit messy. You might lose track of what you're editing, things like that. So what Figma allows you to do is actually draw them out and plan them out, make it actually look functional. So that way, once you have everything prepared, then you would be handing this off to the developers to actually develop your software. Figma also allows you to work with multiple people at once, as you can see right now. Kind of works the same way as like Google Slides does. So everything that each person does, everyone else on this project here will see your changes live. Also going to teach you how to get a free education plan on this. So Figma offers different plans at different price points, but they offer this education plan, which is the same as their professional plan for free for students. So if you search up Figma like free education plan here, and then there's an apply button on here. I'm going to send the link in the chat as well. Whenever you guys feel like it, if you guys are going to, especially planning on using Figma for like your solutions challenge, it'd be a good way to gain free access to extra features, such as unlimited projects that you can make on your one account. You also have unlimited version history. So if anyone's used version control with, let's say, GitHub, you also can customize your file and user permissions. You can set certain projects to being private and invite only, and you can have like shareable team libraries. So to get started, how Figma works is I'm going to show you off. If you guys watch my screen share here. At the top left, there is this hashtag looking icon here in the GUI. And there's like a drop down beside it. But if I just click the icon by itself, you guys should be able to see on the right side, there is a little sidebar here that says design, prototype, inspect, and we want to look at design, which should pop up once you click the hashtag icon. And what this allows you to do is to start by creating a frame on your workspace. So depending on what kind of platform you will be making your software on, let's say I'm going to start with a phone. So I'm going to go to the phone section here, and maybe I would like to create an iPhone 11 or iPhone 10. Oh, okay. So here is a default screen resolution for your phone. You guys can feel free to make one. I'm also going to teach you a little bit shortcuts later on to help with your editing process. So once I have my phone here, right in the middle, what I can do is if I click on it, and you see at the top left, there's like a naming scheme. It says iPhone 11 Pro /10 -1. If I just double click on it or double click it on the left on the tree, on the sidebar on the left side, you can easily edit the name of your frame. And this is useful for keeping track of which kind of slides or frames are like the short description of them. I'm just going to call this like your name iPhone. Okay. So on the left side here, the left sidebar, this is where you can see your layers as well as your assets. And this is what's called like a kind of like a tree here, where I'll show you, the tree will show you all your assets that you have currently on this page. And as I work through this, you'll be able to see how it kind of works and how you can kind of visualize which assets are a subcategory of other assets. So I'm going to show you some keyboard shortcuts for those who can't are having trouble navigating. Essentially, zoom can be found at the top right corner of your screen. You can click on it. You can change the zoom percentage, click on presets ones, but that can be kind of finicky sometimes. So like a quicker, easier way is if you hold control and you use your scroll wheel to just scroll down to zoom out and scroll up to zoom in. That can be really easy. Or you could use control plus or minus on your keyboard to zoom in and out. Panning, there is a hand-looking icon that has a palm of your hand, and if you click on it, your cursor will become a hand, and you can drag around to look around. But a shortcut would be if you use your middle click. So if you don't know what that is, on your scroll wheel, you should be able to click down on it, and if you hold, drag, and hold the middle click down, you should be able to look around. An alternate solution for those of you who might use like Adobe products, they like to use pan, as if you hold spacebar, your hand, your cursor will immediately turn into a hand. So holding spacebar and clicking and dragging will also do the same. And so instead of having to click the hand icon every time. Okay, now I'm gonna go on to how you can work with assets. So assets can be basically anything you see on this like workspace. So it can be an image, like a text field, a button, anything like that. And what I'm gonna show you is how you can work with those assets. So I'm gonna drag a nice photo right here of this nature landscape. And oh, I'm gonna drag it out for now. 1 second. Okay.
Where did you get the photo from, Willie?
This photo, oh, it's just from Google. This is just Google Images. Just search something up, nature desktop wallpaper. Yeah, and there's a lot of like this on Reddit as well that you can look through if you want it. Okay, so as most of you guys know, you can drag the corners of the photo to like readjust it, resize it, stuff like that. And diagonally, you can adjust it. But the problem is that your aspect ratio of your image or whatever you're editing can like shift as you're doing this. So if you want to hold the left shift key while you're dragging, that maintains the aspect ratio of your image. Another shortcut would be, let's see, if I create, and here is a vector image. I'll discuss more about what a vector image is and the difference between this and a regular image. But if I were to edit this, for example, let me just click on it. If I were to drag it down, smaller, bigger, works the same. The thing about vector images is that if you hold Control and Shift, it actually crops it instead of resizing it. So that's another handy shortcut that you can use. Okay. Another shortcut you can use, I think this works on a lot of different platforms as well. While you're resizing, if you hold Shift, but you hold Alt instead, it'll resize based on the center point of that image. So as you can see, the image maintains the exact same center point on the screen as where you left it, and it'll resize it, keeping that position. And the last shortcut I'm going to have everyone do is if you hold the Alt key, your cursor will look like it has two like little triangles if you hover over like this image, for example. And what you can do is you click and drag and it instantly duplicates whatever you're clicking and dragging. So what I'm going to have everyone do is I'm going to delete these images for now, but click on the iPhone frame that I created in the center of the workspace. And I want you to hold Alt, your left Alt key, and drag somewhere along the side, so then to create your own little image. Let's see, does everyone have share permissions? It should work in your browser. I think if you, or maybe it's one at a time. I have a second one over here, you guys can do it. I think you click once and then hold Alt and then drag the frame. Yep. So I can see some of you guys have duplicated it. I think so. Click once with left click to select it, hold left Alt, and then drag away. And I'll help everyone create their own. And I want everyone to rename their frame and put your own name into the name on the left side. You guys forgot how to do that? Basically, go to the frame that you just duplicated. And if you double click on the name that's right above it, it should allow you to instantly edit the name of it on your left side. So if, for example, I'm gonna set mine to my name right here. There you go. Here, I'm gonna move someone else out of the way, and I'm gonna keep mine right here. And if you're having trouble duplicating, you can make your own frame again by clicking the hashtag icon at the top left, selecting phone, and then selecting your iPhone 11 Pro /10. And then it should put a frame in the somewhere in the middle of your screen. The next thing I'm going to go on is working with shapes. So as you can see in most like user interface designs, they're made up of multiple shapes because it's all geometric in different ways. So really basic, I'm going to click the rectangle one from this drop-down view beside the rectangle looking icon. And I'll just click and drag and I'll make a rectangle for myself. The default color is gray, but of course, that's not what we want in most of our designs because that's a very dull color. So on the right side, you can see our design view. And our design view allows us to edit basically anything that relates to whatever we're selecting. So if I'm just selecting this rectangle here, I can edit the position in XY coordinates. I can adjust its width, its height. I can adjust the angle. So if I just turn it 45 degrees, I can do that too. There is a little curving icon here, and this is, I believe, specific to mostly like shapes here. And what that does is add a curvature to the corners of our shape. So I think if I put 15, if you look really closely, you can see that my shape has now rounded corners. And that's really useful for things like buttons or just making the overall design more rounded instead of having sharp corners. A bunch of other things, there are constraints that you can do. That's more of something that you might want to do, look into in the future, especially when you're doing things like web design, because you want to set these different constraints that you can also be coded into things like CSS. And if you set that up, it'll be really easy for the developers to use that. There are other things like the fill color, which is where I want to change the color of my rectangle. So if I click on the hexadecimal code here, there is things like color pickers. You can also type your RGB values, your hex values, other things like that. I'm just going to pick a really simple one, this nice blue here. And while there is just fill selection, that you can also add things like stroke. So stroke would be referring to the border around that rectangle. So for example, if I keep it black and I make the stroke width a lot bigger, it'll add like a black border with a width of 10. And you can choose whether or not it's inside or outside or centered from your shape. There are other things as well, as you can add an effect, things like drop shadow, blurs. Yeah, that's the basics of just your design sidebar with shapes. What you can also do is, especially if you're working with other people in a team or in your workspace, and you're trying to edit, you're editing the same design at the same time, or maybe you're taking turns editing, and you want to leave a comment for someone else. Maybe you want to comment on their design, give them feedbacks and suggestions. There's a little chat bubble at the top left. Their shortcut is if you click C on your keyboard, and your cursor will become this little pointer thing. And I can just place it on, let's say, over here on Tracky's iPhone. I'll just say hello there. Oh, there you go. And once you're in the comment when you select the comment, there will be a sidebar that appears on the right side that will show everyone's comments on this workspace. So in case like maybe you're hopping on to edit this design later time, and your coworker has left a comment for you, and so a notification would appear at the top in a red circle notifying that someone has left a new comment. Okay. Now, well, the next thing we're going to do is look at text tools and fonts as well. So there's a T icon at the top left, or the shortcut is T on your keyboard. And there's two different types of text you can add to a design. If you may not know, there is one of them is called point text, and one of them is called area text. And the difference between them is for point text, if you click the T at the top left and you you just click once, it'll start editing right where you click. And I can just type whatever I want, and you can kind of see there's like a blue outline around the text. And that blue outline expands as we type. And there's no like set width or anything to it. So it'll just keep it as one line unless I hit Shift Enter, and then it goes on to the next. But another useful type of text is the area text. And what that's useful for is if you want to keep your text as a certain width, and you don't want your sentences to go past that width and overlap to other things on your workspace. So if I click T and I click and drag the text field, you can kind of see there's a box here. And what that allows me to do is if I just set a certain width, now it creates this big blue text field, and I can type whatever I want. And once whatever I'm typing to gets close to the end of that area that I've defined, it will automatically go to the next line. And there, yeah. So that's basically how text, the difference between text point and text area. Also, what you can do with text is of course, you can change your the font, like the font type. For example, right now it's set to Roboto. Oh, maybe, and then I can just pick something else. You might get this pop-up that asks you if you want to preload Google Web Fonts. That's just something like an external plugin that you can install into Figma. Let's see, you can change font size, of course. And the typical things you would find in like a typical Word document, as well as like color. You can set this to maybe like a red text or something like that. And you can apply similar effects to that rectangle to the same as the text. All right. I'm gonna show you a really useful tool, I guess. It's another website. This one's made by Google. And if you go to fonts.google.com, I see chat. Fonts.google.com, basically Google provides a bunch of different fonts that you can use and download, specifically for those who don't have these fonts installed already on their computer. And you can use it with Figma. If you install, there's like a Figma font helper.
Oh, Willie, we can't hear you anymore.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now
Yeah,
we can
sorry
hear you.
about that. Oh, someone's missing editing permissions. You should have editing permissions. It says you can edit here. Try creating like a frame or something, or adding a text field somewhere. Okay, anyways, back to Google Fonts. Basically, I just sent the link in here. Oh, that's weird. You guys should have editing permissions. It says you can edit.
I believe I had to go in and verify some sort of an education plan before I could actually start editing, even though you'd given us permissions.
Really?
Yeah, because it said this project is part of an education plan and you need to hit that verify education plan button at the bottom.
Okay, I see. So yeah, if you guys click, where is that link? Here it was. Thank you so much. Yeah, if you guys, I guess you guys have to go to this, the link where I showed you how to like sign up for education plan. Right here, if you click the apply for free education. And if you're logged in already, it'll send you or it'll give you an application form that you kind of fill out, but like it takes like 1 minute, and like the confirmation email and acceptance comes like another minute later. It was pretty quick when I did it. Okay. So discussing Google Fonts, as you can see, they have a bunch of different fonts that you can download here. So I'm just gonna sort this by newest font, because these ones are most likely not installed on people's computers. So if I say, if I want whatever this font's called, you can see that here's an example. It says a regular 400, and I can just click download family, and it'll download this as a zip file that I can open. I can open up. And if you run the I think it's usually an OTF or TTF file inside of that. If you double click it, it'll install it to your computer. And yeah, I'm also going to explain the differences between weights. So as you can see here, this specific font has a bunch of different variations of it. And you can see they have a description like thin, extra light. There's like regular, semi-bold, things like that. But they always come with a number beside it. As you can see, it always ranges from 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, etc. And sometimes some of them have italic in them. And essentially the weight, which is that number, refers to kind of how bolded or how thick your font will be. So you can select specific fonts you want to install. If you don't want to install every single font from here, this family, I can pick certain fonts, and then when I'm ready, I could just hit download all at the bottom right. And Google Fonts is really useful for CSS, since it actually provides you your CSS code that you can just copy paste directly into your CSS file. If you want to add this font to your website, for example, because not every computer is going to have this font. So yeah, that's the basic of Google Fonts. Yeah, so I'm gonna also show you how the asset tree on the left side here works. As you can kind of see, we have everyone's phones here, which is the different frames. And this rectangle I put in here, you can kind of see it's under my phone here, my frame, and it's a little bit indented, indicating that this button is inside of my iPhone frame. And what that kind of allows you to do is if I drag my entire frame around, everything inside of it will move with it. And it also prevents you from overflowing assets outside of your frame. So if I drag my button close to the edge and past it, you can kind of see the part of the button that I dragged like outside of that frame disappears. And that's just a feature of frames that helps you organize yeah, a lot of your design within that frame. Yeah. You can also do things like group multiple items. So either I click and drag over multiple items, I can right click and group selection. So that way, whenever I'm editing or moving this around and resizing it, it'll just stick together like so. But yeah. And you can kind of see on the left side, those assets combined together, and now it became a group that I can rename or do whatever I want with it. Yeah. And if I want to ungroup, I just right click on that group and click ungroup. And yeah. Now I'm going to discuss the difference between JPEG, PNG, and SVG type files. Because not every single image type is the same. And it's really useful to know this kind of thing, especially when you're doing design. I'm going to show you an example of what I mean. So let's say, okay, let's say I go to Google Images, okay, and I search for the McMaster logo, and I click on one of these images. As you can see, it looks like our logo. It has a white background. Whoops. And if I copy this image and I go back, I can paste it in here. But the problem with this logo and this image is that, as you can see, when I put this image over things, this white background is blocking other things that's behind it. And I can fix that by, let's say, okay, if you look on the left side, here's my image asset. I can order them differently. So right now, image is at the top, meaning it's on top of all the other assets. And if I drag it below the rectangle that I made earlier, now the rectangle is above the image. So this rectangle here will be on top of it. And that's one way of, utilizing the white spaces in the background. But it's not very great and very effective use, because now, like, maybe I'm adjusting things later. Now it's gonna mess up and cover over things that I don't want it to. So I don't want this image right here. That's a JPEG image. So that's your basic image. Instead, I want something that has a transparent background. And a tip for Google Images, if you were to search something and you click Tools at the top on that top bar here, and I can go to Color and I can click on Transparent. Now it'll only show me images that have a transparent background. As you can see, there's a checkerboard pattern at in the background of this image. So now, let's say I'm going to save this image somewhere. I save it, and then I use this image, which is now it's a PNG image. Now, as you can kind of see here, if I just make this smaller and put it on my frame, now there is no white background, and things will, you can overlap things, and you can still see the things that are behind them because they have transparent background. And this is what a PNG image is. And you have to make sure that even though PNG images can have transparent backgrounds, you have to make sure that the background is actually transparent and it's not just a white background. I can see someone's put a Mario image in there. Yeah, you can kind of see how when you drag an image into your frame, it'll automatically crop that image to the frame, so it won't like overflow like I mentioned earlier. The last type of image I'm going to mention, and kind of not an image exactly, but it is a vector graphic. So if I just drag one in here, just resize this. So here I have a vector image right here. And you can see the difference between this is that if you're hovering your mouse over it, you can kind of see shapes appear. Like let's say I double click on this. This circle is editable, and so are the other one. Like everything else in here is basically a shape. And what vector images allow you to do is, since they're not based off of pixels, like the pixels we see on our screen, and like what PNG and JPEG images are based off of, you can actually resize this as big as you want, and you won't be able to see any difference in quality, and you won't see any pixel distortion anywhere. Yeah. Since it's 4:30 already, I'm gonna quickly go through the rest of this. Okay, I'm gonna delete everything inside my frame, and I'm gonna talk about the different types of buttons that you can do when you're designing. So the first type of button that we can do is a simple text button. As you can see here, I'm just gonna write some text here. Maybe I'll call this like learn more, okay? And I'll make this a little bit bigger so everyone can see. Okay, now I have a text here that's just learn more, and maybe I want to add a little image right beside it. So let's say I have this nice arrow here. I'm just going to rotate it so it's facing the right way. And I'll put it right beside our text. And I want to transform this text here and this arrow into a button. Basically, for now, we're just going to group them together so they act as a button. But to make it functional is when we get to prototyping, which I'll talk about later on. The next one is an outline button. So that will be useful for if it kind of outlines that the button's a little bit important, but it's not going to be the primary button on your page. And that can, sorry about that. And that can be easily done by creating like a rectangle, for example. And let's say I made the actual fill of this rectangle invisible, and I give it an outline right here. But these right now it's two separate two separate assets. So if I want to combine them together, maybe I'll just highlight over all of them and I'll just group them together. Okay. The next one is a contain button. So what that is, so I'll show you an example right here. Okay. Essentially, a contain button is one that's more like the background is filled. So as opposed to an outline button where you just have like an outline around it, a filled button gives high emphasis on this button. It kind of shows a lot of importance. It's probably the main like button that you want your user to click on when you're looking at that page. So yeah, and you can easily achieve that the same way as the outline button. You just have a container by creating like a rectangular box or something. You fill it with a color and you put text inside of it. Now I'm going to discuss the difference between choosing your corner radius. So as you recall, as I said earlier, these buttons which I'll make out of a rectangle, you can change the corner radius by changing this value at the top right here. So if I set this to 25, this will set this rectangle's corners to have a curving radius of 25 pixels. And now it's a rounded kind of like a pill shape. And there are different kinds of choices that you can make for the corner radius. So 0 pixels is just a rectangle, and that makes it look more classic and professional. So if you want to have a more clean look in some cases, have it geometric and organized. The next one is if you have a 3 to 4 pixel radius, corner radius. So as you can see here, the rectangle is slightly curved, but it still looks mostly rectangular. And this will probably be your most safe choice when you go to design your software. It's more accommodating and friendly, while still keeping a professional look. It's not the most innovative, but it works in most situations. And next one is if I pick one from 6 to 12 pixel in radius. This one is kind of more a trendy style. It's more innovative. It's a little bit more playful, so it kind of less professional in most cases, but it can be used in a variety of different ways to make your design look good. But if it's not used correctly, it can kind of make your design look a little bit messy. And the last one is if you have something that's fully rounded, like so. So if I set this to 90 right here, you can kind of see like there are absolutely no corners. It's completely rounded off where there's only 2 straight edges. And this is more easier on the eyes and more friendly and creative. But it's not particularly the best use for things like for drop down views, like as you can see at the top left with like the arrows beside it. Shapes like these don't work very well. So there is technically no wrong option for choosing your corner radius, as long as you keep in mind to be consistent with your decision and your design system across your entire interface. Yeah. Let's see. I'm going to discuss what components are. Components are a really useful feature. It's not specific to Figma. It's also can be used. Adobe XD also has it. So components are essentially like classes in programming. There are 2 types of components. You have a master component, which is like the original asset. And you have instance components, which are basically a copy of those master components. So I'm going to show you an example here. If I quickly make a button right here, let's say I want to add a text here. I'll just call this submit. I'm going to make sure I'm going to put this in the middle of this button I've made here. Let me change. Let's say I set this to blue color and I set the text to white. Okay. I'm going to make sure that my text is inside of that rectangle that I've made. So if I just drag it until, let's see, should be able to put it, actually, in some cases you don't have to to put it inside of another asset, you can probably just group them together. What's useful about this is if I click on that group that I made and I click this diagonal, like 4 cube looking shape at the top of your screen, you can see it says create component. So if I click on it, it basically still looks the same, but now on the left side on the tree, you can see that that same symbol is indicated beside the group that I just made. And if this is what's called the master component, and to make instance components from this master component, let's say I would duplicate them. And as you can see on the left side, there's not a clear difference between the difference in their looks, but on the tree on the left side, you can see that the symbol has changed. And instead, the one I just duplicated, you can see it's just an empty diagonal square. So now the useful thing about components is this is my master component at the top here. If I were to edit this, let's say I wanted to change the rectangle color to, I want a red instead. But as you can see, the instance component that I just duplicated from that also changes to the exact same color that I just changed my master component to. So this was the original and this was the duplicate. So whatever I do to the master component, the instance component changes with it. Maybe I can change the corner radius on this again. Maybe I don't want that curvature. I want just a 6 pixel radius. So yeah, basically anything I change on the right, on the design view on the right side will affect my instance components. But it doesn't work the other way around. So for example, if I were to change the color of this rectangle on my copy, and I want to change this back to blue, the master component still stays the same as it was earlier. That way, when you're making multiple copies of this like master component right here, and I want to change something specific about this one button, then I can change whatever I want of just this button. And it won't affect the master, and it won't affect any of the other buttons that I've made here. But if I were to change the master one again, so let's say I go here and I want a pink button instead. But now, as you can see, this second button here, so the first instance component I made, doesn't change background. So if I make an edit to any of these instance components, whatever I changed on the master component, so I changed the background color here. If I change the background color on the master one, it still doesn't affect the instance one, the instance component that I modified. That also goes for other things. So if I change this to hello, or I change this back to goodbye, as you can see, the blue button here did change because I didn't modify the text field on the second button on this instance component. So it changes with the master one. But as you can see, I changed the third button here. I changed the text field earlier. So when I modify this master one, it doesn't get affected. And so yeah, components can be really useful, especially when you're designing really large prototypes. Let's say you have like 25 buttons on one page, and you show it to your client, and your client says that they don't like the font or something like that. Instead of having to click into each of these individual buttons and changing the font of every single button that you made, that's where components can come in handy. So you can just change the master one, and everything else will change with it. As we get to the end of this workshop, the best part about Figma that I find is actually prototyping. Yeah, so even though right now we're just creating like the design of it, but we can't really make things work. So I'm gonna head over to my example app that I made here. This was for a hackathon that I did a couple weeks ago. Hopefully nobody will mess anything up while I do this. But prototyping is really useful for creating high fidelity prototypes. Sorry, prototyping is really useful for creating high fidelity prototypes. So you can showcase your clients the design of the app and how it functions. Oh, sorry, my mic is being weird. as I was saying, prototyping is really useful for showcasing your design to clients and showing how your software functions before even having to actually code it. So it makes your software look real and functional. So what I'm gonna do here is this is an app I made a couple weeks ago for a hackathon. It's a really quick mock-up of our idea. And I'm gonna show you how to make things like your buttons work. So prototypes can be really useful and really cool to use. So I'm gonna show you an example right here. If I just click on my first frame of this app and I click the play button, it will take me to right here. It'll show me a nice phone like outline, this frame, and it'll put my design inside of it. And some things cool you can do with it is, as you can see, if I hover my cursor over the button kind of pushes in, indicating, it's kind of functional, and that's something you can do with it. But right now, I think if I click on it, it'll take me to the next page. And so using prototyping in Figma, you can make your app or website functional without actually having to code anything, just for design and presentation purposes. And now I'm going to show you how to add this prototype in. So I'm going to delete this one, the one I made here. Let's see. Okay. So really quickly, if you go on the right side, you can see there's design, prototype, and inspect. We just want to go to prototype here. You can kind of see these like lines that are being drawn everywhere. And what this does is it shows you where your next screen kind of goes when you click on something or when you do an action. So I'm actually going to go down here to this the other part. I deleted all the prototypes that I had before. But let's say I wanted this top button here. There's a button right here. As you can see, this blue button, and I want to add a prototype to it. This way, and let's see here. Okay, so here's my button. And you can see there's a nice dot on the right side of my button here. And if I hover over it, there's a plus sign. So if I click on this plus sign and I drag it, I am able to drag it anywhere I want, and I can point it to where I want this button to go. And if I hover over this frame up here and I let go, this menu will show up, and it has a couple options you can use. Like, okay, on tap, I want to navigate to this frame. And I called this frame, I called it get a code. That's why I'm right on the right here, it says get a code, or I can choose whatever I want. So now if I were to click on this main menu, hit play, let's see. Okay, I have to go to, oh, it's not. Oh, okay, I know why. It's going to my first frame on this. Oh, it is. Okay. It's going up here for some reason. Yeah. So similarly, the one that was done already here earlier, if I click this button, it'll take me to the next page. It doesn't have to be taps, especially since this is a mobile app design. So I want to incorporate features like swiping. And what I can do now is if I click on here, so if I want to go from this screen number 1 to screen number 2, I drag this plus sign over to this frame. And instead of doing tap, I want to do on drag. And I want to navigate here when I drag in the left direction, like here, right? Like that. Yep. So I believe if I click play on this, and I go through the app, so I'm on this screen right now. If I drag, it actually drags to the next page. And I can, yeah. So right now it's stuck here because I haven't added anything else. But if I wanted to, let's say you don't want your user, accidentally skip a page and they wanted to go back, you can actually give a prototype and send this page backwards if needed. Yep. So if I do drag like that, and then I hit play on this, I can, let's see. Yeah, if I drag to the left, or like drag right, it'll go back a page. If I drag left, it goes a page forward. And then, yeah, so you can make your your design more functional. Yeah. There are, yeah, a couple of things that I've done over here. Can't show you right now because I've deleted them, but the problem with Figma is that they don't allow for text fields exactly. So what you can just do in prototyping is kind of pretend to type keys like in letters in here. So that's why I have a couple things here. Like if I tap here, this set of code will appear inside of this text field that I've had set up. So yeah. And then as we get to the end of this, once you're done designing something and you actually want to hand this off to your developers, this is where Figma can come in handy. So on the right side, you can see there is an inspect tab here that's beside the prototype one. And what that does is it actually allows you to kind of see the properties of everything that you've made in Figma. So for example, I click on this main menu on the left side. So this appears, it tells me width, height, top left and left, things like that. And these properties are widely used in different developing programs. It's not like limited to HTML and CSS. So for example, like things like padding and margins is like widely used. And what you can do is once you design your app, you can just give these values to your developers and they can just easily use it. And it also shows you the code for, let's say I want to edit this button, or like, let's see, yeah, this button here, it shows me the width, the height of it, and you can also pick what code you want to write it in. So if you're writing in Swift for iOS apps, you can just have it right here. It creates variables for you, just copy paste into your code, and yeah, easily transferable. And that's like the end of my workshop right now. There are a bunch of resources that I can show you. Let's see. So Figma does have a YouTube channel that has really great tutorials if you want to learn more about it. So as you can see here, they have a bunch of tutorial videos of showing you how to use stuff. There are more features that are a little bit more advanced, like auto layout, that can help benefit your design process really well. Other things would be, let's see, if we go to, there's a really nice website called undraw.co, and this is really, really useful for getting free, like royalty-free vector art. So if you ever want to have your app styled like I did in my design previously, I just went to this website. You can find like vector images of anything you want. You can search different topics and you can use these in your design. There are other really fun things you can do. For example, if I go to like, I think this website here, blobmaker.app, how I made these like waves and stuff that are kind of random, but they look really neat in the background. Blobmaker.app allows you to kind of customize random shapes, and like you can give it a number of vertices and give it a color if you want, and you can randomize it if you also. And you can really easily download this as a vector image and just throw it right into your design. And that's how I made kind of like this creative and friendly app design. So yeah, what I also highly suggest people use is like things like Photoshop and Illustrator. Because a lot of things you might want to edit in images, maybe you want to like kind of fix things up. As you can see here, on the left side are the original vector images that I got off the internet for free. But there are a few things that I don't want in my final image. So as you can see, there's a couple of steps I did in Photoshop and Illustrator to kind of remove things and put things together. Sorry. Okay, you hear me, right? Yeah. So I use Photoshop and Illustrator here to merge things together. because there are some aspects of the vector images that I don't want in my final image, and then I created my own and used that in my app design here. And that's how I made it look really neat. So yeah, that's about it. Yeah, an hour of time has gone by really quickly. There's a couple things I was gonna have everyone kind of create their own design or like reference off of another website and kind of replicate it, but there's not enough time right now. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. I can sit around here for another couple minutes.
Yeah, my question is, Willie, how'd you learn all this stuff? You're in first. How do you know this?
Well, I took a lot of like my free time in the summer and the winter break learning this. Specifically at the beginning of the winter break, I actually went to Udemy for some of these courses. So at when I started learning user interface and user design and experience, I got this one right here. And this course right here is really good. It's like, I forget how many hours of video. There's like 13 hours of video on here. This price tag doesn't actually matter. They offer sales like every single day, and they offer for like $20 for this course. But this is where I mainly started learning design, and Adobe XD has basically the exact same features as Figma, but it doesn't have like this cooperative workspace that you can do with Figma here. But it has the same thing as like components and things like that. And also that course also taught me those like useful websites that you can visit to get those like free resources. There are things like, let's see, if I go to my folder, let's see, there are a bunch of websites like Icon Finder, really useful. Maybe I want to search an icon of a trash can. I just go to the free icons here. And they give you a bunch of images here. And these are really useful for icons you're going to use in your app or website because you can download the vector type images of it right here. And then I'll just throw this into like my design here. And that's where a lot of these icons come from. So yeah.
I have a question.
Yep.
So what's the fastest way to translate the design into the CSS code? Because I know there's generated CSS code, but it's always position absolute. And that's
Yeah.
Like, because I also just participated in a hackathon, and my designer basically say, okay, this is the code for CSS, but then again, you still have to position everything yourself in the actual coding.
Yeah, I see it as like, yeah, some of them are absolute. I wonder if you can change this. Okay. It's a good question, because I think there are, the one that is built into Figma isn't as good, but it does show you like the width and height things that you can directly translate to some properties in CSS. But I think there are plugins you can install for Figma that work with not just CSS, but also things like Flutter or like React Native. I think those work probably better than this, the built-in ones that are given here. Yeah. Anyways, anything else? Anyone else has a question? All right. If not, it's coming really close to 5 o'clock. And that will be the end of the workshop. If nobody has any more questions. Oh, someone's in chat. Oh, you're welcome, guys. All right.